Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into something a little different, a fun and surprisingly real conversation between two friends about their daily routines. But this isn't your usual, I wake up, brush my teeth, and go to work type of story. Instead, you'll overhear quirky habits, hidden emotions, and little details that make their days unique. From staring contests with a cat to peeling oranges for comfort, this dialogue will feel like eavesdropping on a conversation you weren't supposed to hear. Raw, funny, and a bit unusual. Let's get started. I've been training my dreams. Not lucid dreaming exactly, but before I fall asleep, I give my subconscious a specific assignment. Like last night, I asked it to show me what contentment looks like. And I dreamed I was organizing books in a library where every shelf had exactly the right amount of space and every book was exactly where it belonged. When I woke up, I realized I've been cramming too much into my life instead of finding the right amount of space for things.
That's incredible. I didn't know you could negotiate with your own dreams like that. I have this thing where I set 3 alarms, but not for waking up. They're for different emotional check-ins throughout the day. 11:11 a.m. asks, what do you need right now? 3:33 p.m. asks, what are you avoiding? And 7:77 p.m., okay, that's not a real time, but 7:07 p.m. asks, what surprised you today?
Wait, you actually stop what you're doing when those alarms go off and answer the questions?
Most of the time. Yesterday at 11:11, I realized I needed to stretch because I'd been hunched over my laptop for 3 hours straight. At 3:33, I admitted I was avoiding calling the dentist about this weird sensitivity in my back molar. And at 7:07, the surprise was that my neighbor's cat had learned to open my garden gate and was sitting in my tomato plants like he owned the place.
Your neighbor's cat sounds like he has better boundaries than most humans. I love the idea of scheduled emotional check-ins, though. I've been doing something similar, but with textures instead of times. Every morning, I have to find 5 different textures and really pay attention to how they feel. Today, it was the rough ceramic of my coffee mug, the smooth coolness of my bathroom counter, the soft fuzz of my sweater, the bumpy surface of my phone case, and the weird papery feeling of a receipt I found in my jacket pocket.
Why textures?
I realized I spend most of my day in my head, thinking about abstract problems and future scenarios, and I never actually inhabit my body. The texture thing forces me to remember I have hands and nerve endings and exist in physical space. Plus, it's like a tiny mindfulness practice that doesn't require sitting still or breathing exercises or any of the things that make me feel like I'm performing meditation instead of actually being present.
That's genius. I hate traditional meditation because it feels like another item on my productivity to-do list. But texture awareness sounds like something I could actually sustain. Do you have favorite textures?
Tree bark is amazing. Every tree has completely different skin. Smooth river rocks make me feel instantly calm. And there's this specific type of worn denim that feels like it's been loved by someone for years. What I really hate is that squeaky feeling when you rub 2 pieces of styrofoam together. It makes my teeth hurt just thinking about it.
Oh God, styrofoam is awful. But speaking of things that make your teeth hurt, I've been keeping a record of all the times I bite my tongue or bump into things or drop stuff because I realized these little physical accidents happen more when I'm emotionally scattered. Like last Tuesday, I was anxious about a work presentation, and I bit my tongue twice, knocked over my water glass, and walked into the same door frame 3 times.
Your body is giving you anxiety reports. That's actually really smart tracking. Do you do anything with the data?
I'm still figuring that out. But I've noticed that on days when I acknowledge my stress early, like during my 11:11 check-in, I'm less likely to spend the afternoon being a walking disaster. It's like my body doesn't have to shout as loud to get my attention if my brain is already listening.
That makes so much sense. My dream assignments work similarly. If I give my subconscious a constructive job to do overnight, I wake up with insights instead of just anxiety spirals about everything I forgot to worry about the day before.
What other assignments have you given your dreams?
Last week, I asked for guidance about whether to quit my job, and I dreamed I was in this enormous maze where every path led to a different door, but none of the doors had labels. I kept trying to guess which door was the right choice until I realized the dream wasn't about choosing the perfect door. It was about being okay with not knowing what's behind any door before you open it.
So your subconscious told you that the uncertainty is the point, not the problem.
Exactly. And that helped me realize I've been paralyzed by trying to make the perfect decision instead of just making any decision and then dealing with whatever comes next. Sometimes I think we treat choices like they're permanent when most of them are actually just directions you can walk in for a while.
Directions you can walk in for a while? I love that. It takes so much pressure off. Speaking of pressure, I've been experimenting with what I call productive selfishness. Like, instead of saying yes to everything because I think I should be helpful, I ask myself, will doing this thing make me more or less able to show up as the person I actually want to be?
Give me an example.
My friend Sarah asked me to help her move last weekend, and normally I would have said yes automatically because that's what good friends do. But I'd already committed to spending Saturday working on this art project I've been excited about for weeks. So I asked myself the question and realized that spending the day doing creative work I love would make me much better company for Sarah later than showing up resentful and exhausted from lifting heavy furniture.
Did you tell her that?
Sort of. I said I couldn't help with the move, but offered to bring dinner to her new place Sunday night and help her unpack books, which is actually more my speed anyway. She was totally fine with it, and we had a great time organizing her bookshelves and eating Thai food and talking about why she chose that neighborhood.
So, productive selfishness actually led to better friendship, not worse friendship.
Right. And I showed up as someone who is genuinely excited to spend time with her instead of someone who is there out of obligation. It turns out authenticity is a much better gift than martyrdom.
I need to learn that lesson. I have this terrible habit of saying yes to social events I don't want to attend, and then spending the entire time mentally composing my excuse for leaving early. Last month, I went to a birthday party where I knew maybe 2 people, spent 40 minutes hiding in the bathroom, scrolling through my phone, and left without saying goodbye because I was too anxious to navigate the social ritual of departure.
That sounds exhausting. What would productive selfishness look like in that situation?
Probably declining the invitation in the first place and suggesting coffee with the birthday person sometime when we could actually have a real conversation instead of shouting over music and strangers. Or, if I did go to the party, maybe setting a time limit in advance so I could leave without feeling guilty about it.
Yes, boundaries as self-care instead of boundaries as rejection of other people. I've started telling friends I can stay until 9 p.m. when I arrive at social events, and it's amazing how much more present I am when I know I have a predetermined exit strategy.
That's brilliant. I'm going to steal that technique. Actually, speaking of techniques for managing social energy, I've been categorizing my relationships based on what they feel like physically. Some people feel like warm sunlight, some feel like cozy blankets, some feel like iced coffee on a hot day. But some people feel like wearing wool sweaters in humid weather or sitting in uncomfortable chairs.
And presumably, you try to spend more time with the sunlight people and less time with the itchy sweater people?
I'm trying to, yeah, but it's complicated because some of the itchy sweater people are family or coworkers I can't exactly avoid. So I've been experimenting with adjusting how much of myself I bring to different interactions. Like with my aunt, who always criticizes my life choices, I've learned to show up as polite niece having surface level conversation instead of vulnerable human seeking understanding and approval.
That's such a good strategy. Different versions of yourself for different contexts instead of trying to be equally open and authentic with everyone all the time.
Exactly. It's not being fake, it's being appropriate. I don't need to share my deepest thoughts with my dentist or seek emotional validation from my boss. But I was getting exhausted trying to be the same level of emotionally available to everyone, regardless of whether they could actually hold that energy.
Yes, and some relationships are better when they stay in their natural containers. Like I have this coworker who's great for complaining about office politics and sharing funny memes, but terrible at deeper conversations about feelings or life goals. Once I accepted that, our friendship became much more enjoyable because I stopped trying to get emotional support from someone who's just not wired to provide it.
It's like emotional right sizing, expecting from people what they're actually capable of giving instead of what you wish they could give.
Right. And also recognizing that you don't have to be everything to everyone else either. I used to exhaust myself trying to be the perfect supportive friend to everyone, but now I'm more honest about my own limitations. Like, I'm great at listening to work stress and relationship drama, but I'm terrible at giving advice about financial planning or home improvement projects.
Do you actually tell people that? I'm not the friend to ask about money stuff.
Sometimes, yeah, but usually I just redirect them to friends who are better equipped. Like, oh, you should definitely talk to Jamie about retirement planning. She's amazing at that stuff. Instead of pretending I know anything about investment accounts and giving terrible advice.
That's so mature. I'm still learning how to say I don't know without feeling like I'm disappointing people. I have this weird compulsion to have opinions about everything, even topics I know nothing about.
Oh, God, me too. Especially in group conversations where everyone seems really informed about current events or pop culture or whatever, and I'm just nodding along pretending I understand the references. I've been trying to get more comfortable with saying things like, I haven't read about that. Can someone give me the context? Instead of just smiling and hoping the conversation moves on.
Yes. And usually, when you admit you don't know something, people are actually excited to explain it to you. Like they get to be the expert for a minute and you get to learn something new. It's a win win, but it requires swallowing your ego about appearing knowledgeable all the time.
Exactly. Plus, asking genuine questions often leads to much more interesting conversations than pretending you already know everything. Last week, I admitted I didn't understand cryptocurrency, and my friend spent 20 minutes explaining blockchain technology, and now I actually understand why people are excited about it, instead of just knowing it's some kind of digital money thing.
I love that. Curiosity is social lubrication. I'm going to try that instead of my usual strategy of Googling things frantically before social events so I can participate in conversations about topics I have no real interest in.
You prep for social events like their job interviews?
Kind of, yeah. I read news articles and think of interesting anecdotes and basically create a social performance designed to make people think I'm informed and engaging. It's exhausting, and I usually forget everything I prepared anyway because I'm too nervous to remember my talking points.
That sounds like way more work than just showing up as yourself and being genuinely curious about what other people want to talk about.
You're right, but showing up as myself feels so vulnerable. What if myself is boring? What if I don't have anything interesting to contribute?
But what if yourself is exactly what the conversation needs? Like, what if your questions and perspective and sense of humor are more valuable than your ability to discuss current events you don't actually care about?
That's a really different way to think about social interaction. Instead of performing knowledge, just offering genuine engagement.
Right. And honestly, some of the most memorable conversations I've had were with people who asked great questions or shared funny stories about their own lives, not people who could recite newspaper headlines.
You know what's funny? This whole conversation started with me talking about dream assignments and you talking about emotional alarm clocks. But we've basically been discussing different ways of being more authentic and intentional about how we move through the world.
That's true. Whether it's negotiating with our subconscious or checking in with our bodies or right-sizing our relationships, we're all trying to figure out how to live more deliberately instead of just reacting to whatever happens to us.
And maybe all these weird little practices we've developed are just ways of creating space between stimulus and response. So we can choose how to engage instead of operating on autopilot all the time.
Yes, like your texture practice creates space between you and your anxiety by grounding you in physical sensation. My alarm questions create space between me and my emotions by making them conscious instead of just background noise.
And your productive selfishness creates space between other people's request and your automatic yes. So you can consider what you actually want to give.
Right. It's all about inserting little moments of choice into routines that used to just happen automatically.
I love that phrase, inserting moments of choice. That's what makes life feel intentional instead of accidental.
Exactly. And the more we practice creating those moments in small daily situations, the better we get at recognizing them in bigger life decisions too.
Like my job situation. Instead of just staying because leaving feels scary or just quitting because staying feels stagnant, I can create space to actually examine what I want my work life to feel like and then make choices that move me in that direction.
And I can apply the same principle to relationships, creative projects, how I spend my weekends, all of it. Just constantly asking, is this choice moving me toward the person I want to be or away from her?
Here's to dream assignments and emotional check ins and texture awareness and productive selfishness and all the other weird ways we're learning to live on purpose.
And to the realization that authenticity isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you keep choosing, one small intentional moment at a time.
I've been collecting silences. Not the awkward kind, the intentional ones. Like yesterday, I was walking to work, and instead of putting in my earbuds like usual, I just listened to the city breathing. Car doors closing, footsteps on different surfaces, that weird humming sound the traffic lights make. I realized I've been noise canceling my own life for years.
That's beautiful. I do something similar, but with colors I'm not supposed to notice. Like I've started photographing the insides of trash cans because the combinations are accidentally gorgeous. Crumpled blue receipts against orange peels, silver candy wrappers catching light. My phone is full of pictures that would probably make people think I've lost my mind, but they make me feel like I'm seeing magic in places no one else bothers to look.
Trash can photography. That's either deeply artistic or evidence of a complete mental breakdown. And honestly, I can't tell which one I'm hoping for. Do you ever show them to anyone?
Never. They're just for me. I call them my invisible gallery. Beautiful things that exist for maybe 30 seconds before the garbage truck comes and destroys the composition forever. It makes me feel like I'm documenting these tiny accidental art installations that the universe creates and then immediately erases.
That's actually profound. You're like a war correspondent for ephemeral beauty. I love that concept of the invisible gallery. I've been doing something kind of similar with conversations. I write down fragments of things I overhear that sound like poetry when taken out of context. Yesterday, someone at the coffee shop said, "My Tuesday energy is completely off-brand for who I'm trying to become." And I spent the rest of the day thinking about what it means to have branded energy.
Branded energy. That's amazing. Like we're all walking around trying to maintain consistent personal aesthetics, even in how we feel about weekdays. Do you keep all these conversation fragments somewhere?
I have this little notebook that's basically just accidental poetry from strangers. The avocados aren't cooperating with my life timeline. She texts like someone who's afraid of punctuation. I'm emotionally available but geographically problematic. Sometimes I read through it and it's like this weird anthropological study of how people talk when they think no one's paying attention.
I need to start collecting overheard phrases. That's brilliant. Although, speaking of paying attention to things we're not supposed to, I've been practicing what I call productive eavesdropping. Not listening to private conversations, but tuning into the emotional undercurrents in public spaces. Like, you can tell so much about a restaurant's energy just by listening to how the servers talk to each other, or whether customers are making small talk with genuine interest, or just filling silence.
Emotional weather reporting for social environments. I bet you're really good at knowing which cafes to avoid based on the vibe when you walk in.
Exactly. There's this one place near my apartment where the baristas always seem genuinely happy to see each other, and the customers linger over their drinks and make eye contact when they're talking. But there's another place where everyone feels rushed and a little desperate, like they're all trying to caffeinate their way out of existential dread. Same coffee, completely different experience.
That's so true. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. How much of our daily experience is determined by these subtle atmospheric things we barely consciously notice? Like, I have this theory that some places absorb human emotions over time and then radiate them back out. Happy places make you happier, anxious places make you anxious, regardless of what you walked in feeling.
Yes, like emotional architecture. Some buildings just feel good to be in, and some feel heavy or unsettled. And it's not necessarily about how they look. I swear my old apartment was absorbing my breakup energy and feeding it back to me. I couldn't figure out why I felt so sad there until I moved, and suddenly I could remember what it felt like to just exist without carrying this constant low-level heartbreak.
Breakup energy absorption. That's actually a really interesting way to think about how spaces hold memories. Did you do anything to try to clear the energy before you moved?
I tried everything. Burned sage, which felt ridiculous given my name, rearranged furniture, bought new sheets, even painted one wall a completely different color. But I think some emotional imprints are too deep to just redecorate away. Sometimes you have to physically leave and start over somewhere that doesn't know your story.
That makes sense. Fresh spaces for fresh starts. Although I wonder if we also carry our emotional patterns with us and just recreate the same energy wherever we go. Like, what if it wasn't your apartment that was sad? What if you just needed to learn how to be a person who wasn't defined by heartbreak?
Ooh, that's uncomfortably insightful. Yeah, I think you might be right. The new apartment doesn't feel different because it's happier. It feels different because I finally got tired of being the sad girl who lives somewhere sad. I had to choose to stop feeding that identity.
Identity is a choice rather than just something that happens to you. I've been experimenting with that concept lately. Like, every morning, I consciously decide what kind of person I want to be that day, instead of just defaulting to whoever I was yesterday.
How does that work practically?
It's weird, but simple. Before I get out of bed, I ask myself, what would it feel like to move through today as someone who genuinely likes herself? And then I try to make small choices throughout the day that align with that energy. Like, someone who likes herself probably eats lunch instead of just drinking coffee and calling it a meal. She probably speaks up when she has something to contribute instead of assuming her thoughts aren't worth sharing.
That's so different from just trying to build self-esteem through affirmations or whatever. You're actually practicing being the person you want to be instead of just telling yourself you should feel differently.
Right. And the weird thing is that it's working. Not all at once and not perfectly, but I'm starting to recognize the version of myself that makes choices from self-respect instead of self-doubt. She feels more real every day.
I love that. I might try that approach with creativity. Like, instead of waiting to feel inspired, I could ask, what would it feel like to move through today as someone who creates things? And then see what small creative choices that version of me would make.
Yes, and you're already doing it with your invisible gallery. Trash can photography is definitely something a person who creates things would do. You're documenting beauty that no one else sees. That's deeply creative.
You know what's funny? I never thought of it as real art because it's just pictures on my phone that I never print or share or do anything official with. But maybe that's exactly what makes it pure creativity. It exists just for the joy of creating without any external validation or purpose.
That might be the most honest kind of art. No performance, no audience, just the simple pleasure of noticing and capturing something beautiful. Although, speaking of audiences, I've been wondering if part of the reason I collect overheard conversations is because it makes me feel less alone. Like all these strangers are having these wonderfully human moments, and by paying attention to them, I get to be part of the collective human experience without actually having to interact.
That's such a beautiful way to think about loneliness. Instead of just feeling isolated, you're choosing to feel connected to the general human condition, eavesdropping as empathy practice.
Exactly. And it's taught me that everyone is carrying around these complex inner worlds that are just as elaborate and strange as mine. Like yesterday, I heard someone say, I'm having an argument with my future self about whether to buy organic blueberries. And I realized that person is probably just as weird and thoughtful and confused about life as I am.
The organic blueberry internal debate is so relatable. I have those kinds of conversations with myself constantly. Like this morning, I spent 10 minutes debating whether to wash my hair or just embrace the slightly grimy artistic vibe I had going. Future me wanted clean hair, but present me was enjoying feeling a little bohemian and rebellious.
Who won the hair debate?
Present me, obviously. But I compromised by putting it in a messy bun that looked intentional instead of just neglected. It's like negotiating between different versions of yourself to find solutions that honor multiple perspectives.
I do that too, especially with food. Responsible me wants salad, comfort-seeking me wants pasta, and lazy me wants to just eat crackers for dinner. Sometimes I end up with pasta salad, which satisfies at least 2 out of 3 internal constituencies.
Pasta salad as political compromise between your various selves. I love that. It's like internal diplomacy instead of just letting whichever voice is loudest make all the decisions.
Right. And I think that's part of what makes daily routines so important. They're not just habits, they're ways of creating structure for all the different people we are at different times. Like morning me needs coffee and quiet, afternoon me needs movement and tasks, evening me needs wind down rituals and connection.
Yes, and when you honor the needs of your different temporal selves, life feels more harmonious overall. I've started thinking of my day as hosting different versions of myself rather than trying to be one consistent person from wake up to bedtime.
That takes so much pressure off. Instead of trying to maintain some perfect version of yourself all day, you can just try to be appropriate for each moment. Morning you doesn't have to be as socially energetic as afternoon you. Evening you doesn't have to be as ambitious as morning you.
Exactly. And it explains why certain activities feel right at certain times, but terrible at others. Like, I can't do creative work in the morning because morning me is too anxious about all the things I need to accomplish. But evening me loves getting lost in art projects because she's already completed the day's responsibilities.
That's so smart. I've been trying to force myself to be equally productive at all hours, but what if productivity looks different for different versions of myself? Like maybe morning me is good at planning and organizing, but afternoon me is better at actually executing tasks, and evening me is good at reflection and processing.
Yes, play to each version's strengths instead of fighting their limitations. Morning you probably shouldn't make major decisions because you're still emotionally calibrating, but she might be great at gentle tasks like watering plants or reading the news without judgment.
And evening me shouldn't try to start new projects because she's winding down, but she's perfect for reviewing the day and setting intentions for tomorrow. It's like having a whole internal team with different specialties.
I love that metaphor. We're not just one person trying to do everything. We're a small company of selves who can delegate responsibilities based on our temporal skill sets.
Which brings us back to paying attention, doesn't it? Whether it's collecting silences or photographing trash cans or eavesdropping on conversations, we're all trying to notice what's actually happening instead of just sleepwalking through our lives.
Right. And maybe all these weird little practices we've developed are just ways of staying curious about ordinary experience instead of taking it for granted.
Like your invisible gallery forces you to see beauty in unexpected places. My conversation collecting forces me to hear the poetry in everyday speech. Your emotional weather reporting forces you to notice the subtle atmospheres that most people ignore.
And your silence collecting forces you to hear the world's actual soundtrack instead of just the noise you think you're supposed to be listening to.
It's all about attention as a form of respect, isn't it? Respecting the complexity of strangers, the beauty of discarded things, the wisdom of different versions of ourselves, the richness of moments we usually rush through.
Yes. And maybe that's what makes life feel meaningful.
Not the big dramatic events, but the quality of attention we bring to all the small, ordinary moments that actually make up most of our existence.
You know what's funny? We started talking about our weird daily habits, and we ended up discussing philosophy and art and psychology and the nature of consciousness. Maybe that's what happens when you really pay attention to anything. It opens up into everything else.
Or maybe it's what happens when you have a conversation with someone who's also practicing curiosity about ordinary life. Like, we're both doing different experiments in awareness. So of course we're going to connect those experiments to bigger questions about how to live.
True. It's rare to find someone who doesn't think photographing trash cans or collecting overheard phrases is crazy. Most people would just be like, that's weird, and change the subject.
But weird is where all the interesting stuff happens. Normal is just what everyone agrees to pretend is meaningful, so they don't have to think too hard about what actually matters to them.
Normal is just what everyone agrees to pretend is meaningful. That's going in my notebook of accidental philosophy. Right next to my Tuesday energy is completely off-brand for who I'm trying to become.
And I'm definitely going to remember that phrase about attention as respect. It perfectly captures what I'm trying to do with my invisible gallery, respecting the accidental beauty that most people literally throw away.
Here's to weird practices that keep us awake to our own lives, and to friends who understand that paying attention is a radical act in a world that profits from our distraction.
And to the realization that the most ordinary moments are actually the most extraordinary, if you're curious enough to really look at them.
Perfect. Now I'm going to go collect some silences on my walk home and see what the city wants to tell me today.
And I'm going to keep my eyes open for accidental art installations in unexpected places. Who knows what invisible gallery pieces I'll discover before bedtime?
I've been conducting morning interviews with my plant houses. Not talking to them exactly, more like asking them questions about how they want to spend the day and then using their leaves as a kind of botanical oracle. If my philodendron is droopy, it means I need to slow down. If my snake plant is standing extra tall, it's telling me to be more assertive. Yesterday, my spider plant had 3 new babies, which I interpreted as today is for creating something new.
That's either the most creative form of self-therapy I've ever heard, or you're one step away from starting a plant-based cult. I love it. Do they ever give you bad advice?
Well, last week my cactus looked particularly spiky, and I decided that meant I should be more defensive and guard it. I spent the entire day being weirdly confrontational with everyone, including the grocery store cashier who was just trying to ask if I found everything okay. So maybe I need to work on my plant translation skills.
Or maybe your cactus was just having a bad day too. I have something similar, but with mirrors instead of plants. Every time I pass a reflective surface, I make eye contact with myself and ask one question. What are you pretending not to know right now? It's terrifying how often I actually have an immediate answer.
Oh God, that's intense. What kind of things do you discover you're pretending not to know?
Yesterday, it was, you're avoiding checking your bank balance because you're afraid of how much money you spent on books this month. Last week, it was, you know exactly why your stomach hurts and it has nothing to do with that salad. The mirror doesn't let me lie to myself the way my internal voice does.
Mirror as truth detector. I might try that, though I'm scared of what I might learn. I already know I'm avoiding calling my mom back, and I definitely know I should probably go to the dentist, and I absolutely know that the weird noise my car makes when I turn left is not just going to fix itself.
See? You do know things. The mirror would just make you admit them out loud instead of carrying them around as this low-level background anxiety. Speaking of which, I've started assigning emotional colors to different days of the week and dressing accordingly. Today felt yellow-orange, so I'm wearing this mustard sweater that makes me feel like optimistic sunshine.
What do the other days feel like?
Monday is always gray-blue, like that feeling when you're underwater in a swimming pool. Wednesday is green, steady, and reliable, like tree energy. Friday is definitely red, but not angry red, more like celebration red. And Sunday is purple. which sounds fancy, but it's actually the color of melancholy mixed with anticipation.
I love that you've created an entire emotional color calendar. Does wearing the day's color actually change how you feel?
It sounds ridiculous, but yes. Like on Monday, I wear my soft gray cardigan, and it helps me accept the underwater feeling instead of fighting it. And on Friday, I wear something red, and it reminds me that endings can be celebratory instead of just exhausting.
That's actually brilliant psychological manipulation of yourself. I do something kind of similar, but with textures instead of colors. Like on days when I feel emotionally raw, I wear really soft fabrics that feel like a hug. When I'm feeling scattered, I wear structured pieces that help me feel contained. When I'm sad, I wear something with pockets, so I have places to put my hands.
Pockets for sadness. That's so specific and perfect. I never thought about how much my hands need somewhere to go when I'm upset. Do you have other texture strategies?
Corduroy when I need to feel grounded. Something about those ridges feels like connection to earth. Silk when I want to feel like I'm moving through the world gracefully instead of bumping into things. And this one wool sweater that's slightly scratchy, which I wear when I need to stay alert and not drift off into daydreams.
You're like a textile therapist for your own emotions. That's so much more sophisticated than my approach, which is basically just throwing on whatever smells clean and hoping for the best.
But your color system is way more intentional than most people's relationship with clothing. Most people just wear whatever, but you're consciously choosing to support your emotional landscape. That's actually really advanced self-care disguised as getting dressed.
When you put it like that, it sounds much less weird. Although, speaking of advanced self-care, I've been experimenting with what I call emotional meal planning. Not just planning what to eat, but planning what emotions I want to cultivate through food.
How does that work?
Like, if I know I have a stressful meeting on Tuesday, I'll plan to make soup on Monday night because the process of chopping vegetables and stirring things is meditative, and then I have comfort food waiting for me when I get home stressed. If I'm feeling disconnected from myself, I'll plan a meal that requires really paying attention. One where you have to taste and adjust seasoning, where you can't just follow a recipe mindlessly.
That's incredible. You're using cooking as both meditation and emotional preparation. I usually just eat whatever requires the least decision making, which probably explains why I feel so scattered all the time.
It's not about having elaborate meals every day. Sometimes emotional meal planning is just, I know I'll be tired Thursday, so I'm making extra rice today so I can have easy fried rice later. Or I'm feeling lonely, so I'm going to make bread because kneading dough feels like having a conversation with myself.
Bread as self-conversation, I love that. I might try that instead of my usual stress response, which is eating cereal for dinner while standing in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone.
Oh God, the standing in the kitchen, cereal dinner. I know it well. Although, there's something to be said for cereal as emergency food, when you just need calories and can't handle actual cooking decisions.
True. Sometimes cereal is self-care too, just in a different way. Like, I'm too overwhelmed to make real food, but I'm still feeding myself something, so that's a win.
Exactly. Not every meal has to be emotionally intentional. Sometimes you just need to survive Tuesday. But having some meals that are consciously nourishing, not just nutritionally, but emotionally, makes the survival meals feel like choices instead of failures.
That's such a healthy way to think about it. I've been so hard on myself for not cooking elaborate meals every night, but maybe the goal is just being intentional sometimes, not being perfect always.
Right. And intention can look like a lot of different things. Like sometimes my emotional meal planning is just lighting a candle while I eat leftover pizza because eating by candlelight makes even boring food feel like I'm treating myself with respect.
Candlelight as dignity practice. I love that. You know what's funny? We started talking about plant oracles and mirror questions, but we've basically been discussing all these ways we're trying to take care of ourselves that go way beyond typical self-care advice.
Yeah, like everyone talks about bubble baths and face masks, but we're over here developing complex systems for emotional navigation using plant houses and textures and meal psychology.
Maybe that's what actual self-care looks like when you really pay attention to what you need. Not generic treat yourself activities, but personalized rituals that help you stay connected to yourself.
And maybe all these weird little practices are just ways of asking, what do I need right now? And then actually listening to the answer instead of just powering through.
Exactly. Like your mirror questions force you to check in with yourself honestly, and your plant consultations are really just a creative way of accessing your own intuition.
And your texture choices are basically asking, how do I want to feel in my own skin today? Which is such a fundamental question that most people never even think to ask.
Right. And your color system is asking, what emotional energy do I want to embody? Which is incredibly intentional for something as routine as getting dressed.
It's like we're all walking around with these sophisticated internal guidance systems, but we need external rituals and structures to actually access them.
Because just sitting still and asking, what do I need, feels too vague and overwhelming. But asking a plant or a mirror or your closet makes it concrete enough to actually get useful information.
Yes, and there's something about externalizing the conversation that makes it feel less like neurotic self-analysis and more like friendly consultation with wise advisors who happen to be botanical or reflective or textile-based.
We're basically admitting that we've turned everyday objects into therapists because actual self reflection is too hard to do directly.
And honestly, if it works, it works. My mirror never judges me for avoiding my bank balance, and your plants never make you feel guilty for needing to slow down.
Plus, they're always available for consultation. They don't charge by the hour, and they never try to give you advice about your love life unless you specifically ask.
Perfect. Here's to plant oracles and mirror wisdom and emotional meal planning and texture therapy, whatever it takes to stay awake to our own lives.
And to friends who understand that taking care of yourself sometimes requires getting creative about what care actually looks like.